You are now live. Let's see if we can find Erik this time. There he is. There's Erik. I'm in. Waiting for Erik. Thanks for your patience, everybody. There he is, Erik. How's it going?
Hey there. All right, got it to work.
Yeah, we got it. It can always be a little hairy in the beginning, but we'll get it sorted. I just gotta adjust my camera here. There, that's better. That's better. How's it going,
All right.
man?
What's that?
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Doing good.
Good,
Yeah.
good.
Just
it feels like on a Monday we should say, I hope everyone had a good weekend, but I know today is gonna feel like Saturday.
yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I woke up and I didn't quite know what day it was today. So
I've always wanted a Monday to feel like Saturday, but now I've got what I've wished for, and I'm not that pleased. So Erik, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate you taking some time. I know you've got a young family and you've been taking care of them. And as in our little chat we had earlier today, you said you're trying to get used to the new normal. I know we all are.
Yeah.
Just for the record here, I've started these lockdown learning sessions, because I'm really bored. And I suspect some other golf coaches are. And B, I thought to myself, what can we do to help? What can we do to help? And so it was about a week ago over a bottle of wine one evening where I thought, hey, let's try to do something. And I sent out a text to yourself and a bunch of the guys at Ping, and half a glass of wine later, everybody had said yes. And I said, oh, I think this can work. I think this can work. And so really looking forward to it. We've got some good topics. Erik, we're going to cut straight to it if that's okay with you.
Let's do it.
I recently did a test, and I know there's a lot of misunderstanding out there. And it is my opinion that as golf coaches, golf instructors, we need to know more about equipment. We need to be able to at least direct our students to the right genre, so to speak. Not necessarily say, hey, get the set of irons, although many people do come to me and say, Andrew, just tell me what to get. Okay, I don't care, just write it down and I'll go get that. Okay, and so I wanted to talk, and I did a test myself. I tested the Ping Blueprint and the Ping i500, both super looking irons, beautiful looking irons. The Blueprint can look a little intimidating, but when you hit it right, it is absolutely minty fresh. The i500 has got a great look to it, but they perform very differently. Could you tell us two things I want to ask in this category here, Erik? One, who are each of those sets made for? I think we know who the Blueprints are made for. Tony Finau, okay. But the i500s, what can we see that's going to be different in those sets? And B, later on, tell us about the Loft situation, please.
Yeah. So, you look at those two irons, they're definitely, the first thing you'll notice is they're completely different construction. So if you go back in the history of irons, right, you kind of started out with these forged muscle backs, and that was what all the irons were. This is before my day. And then, Carsten came along and introduced the idea of a cavity back, trying to take his philosophies that he introduced on putters and, create a cavity in the back and move that mass to the heel and to the toe and to the perimeter, right? Perimeter weighting. And he did that more so to introduce forgiveness into irons, right? So to maintain ball speed when you didn't hit it dead center. Yeah. And then we've evolved into now creating taking metalwood construction, and taking those principles of metalwood construction and incorporating those into an iron. And there's some MOI benefits to that, but there you're really trying to create ball speed. And so the i500 iron with its metalwood construction, it's a steel iron and it has a forged high strength steel face. you know, a separate steel as a body that allows us to adjust lie angle and things like that. That iron is really created to generate ball speed and distance for that player who's can benefit from hitting one less club into the green, and you know, maybe over time, you know, likes the look of that player's iron, that muscle back iron, but needs a little bit of that extra distance to score, and to improve their game. And so, you know, with each of our irons, we definitely have a player in mind and a pain that we're trying to alleviate for that player. You know, with the blueprint, that was more geared toward shot making and workability. With the I-500, that was, you know, more kind of putting a premium on trying to get that player that extra distance, allowing them to hit one less club into the green, but giving them something that still was an inspiring look and one that appealed to, you know, that player who maybe used to be playing blueprint, but now really should be looking at something like an I-500.
Okay. And Erik, can you please explain to us, because I really do want everybody to understand this. Is the blueprint standard 7-iron, 34 degrees.
Yeah.
The I-500 standard 7-iron, 30.5 degrees. 3.5 degrees difference in loft. Okay. And a lot of people are under the false impression that what club manufacturers have done is they've simply just de-lofted these irons to make them go further. Okay. Can you please explain that?
Yeah. So I think what's really interesting when you get into both, you know, cavity back and then metalwood construction is that, you know, at impact, right, at the impact of a ball and an iron, right, there's a whole lot of force. So, you know, you could get to 2,000 pounds of force now over a short period of time, but that's a lot of force between the ball and the club, right? So things are going to deform.
Yes.
With a blueprint or something that's, you know, a fairly rigid iron, the ball's doing the majority of the deformation, right?
Okay.
The deflecting. And so when you hit that blueprint iron, you know, you get that kind of mushy feel, and like, you know, you hear it's a little bit of a softer sound. It's because the majority of what's going on is the ball's deforming during impact, and the iron's not deforming a whole lot. Now, when we're trying to create ball speed, one of the things when the ball deforms is it's a viscoelastic material. Okay, a big word, but one of the things with those materials is that they experience something called hysteresis. So energy's lost when that ball deforms. And with an iron, where you thin out the face and you implement metalwood construction, you're now, during impact, that ball's deforming, but now the metallic, the titanium or the steel, are also deforming and deflecting during impact. And that takes a little bit of the pressure off of the ball to maintain the brunt of that impact. And now whereas the ball loses a bit of energy as it compresses, the metallic doesn't, right? It doesn't experience that same phenomenon that the viscoelastic does. Is that making sense here? I feel like I'm using a lot of big words, but
burden.
Yes, and so it can do that in a number of ways. So if you look at like a driver, I think people refer to it as like trampoline effect or, you know, things like that, but we refer to it as like drum bending, right? So you have the kind of center of the face deforming, and it kind of deforms like a drum. But there's other ways that things can deflect. Other modes maybe would be a way to refer to it. And so with something like an I-500 iron or a G710 iron, not only is there some drum bending, but we refer to it as loft flexing. So not only is it that metallic kind of bending and deflecting in a drum fashion, but a lot of it's kind of in this more diving board type mode, where that top rail is kind of bending back and launching the ball up, if that makes sense.
So the face tips back more easily.
Yes. And so it's designed to do that, right? And so that it's designed to kind of bend back, and with that you create higher launch angles. So if we took, you know, two irons, the Blueprint and the I-500, and did them at the same loft, that I-500 is going to launch a lot higher than the Blueprint, you know, because of this loft flexing. And so you get, you know, say like a mile an hour out of that extra loft flexing. But now we've got this extra height and trajectory. And so it's a lot of extra height. And so you end up de-lofting it a little bit. And so when you end up looking at your launch angles, you're getting higher ball speeds for, you know, comparable launch angles. And I don't know if during your test.
That's exactly what I got in my test, Eric. And I would encourage everyone, go to my YouTube channel and go and check it out. I've got the TrackMan numbers posted. I launched the balls at almost exactly the same height. The ball speeds were quite significantly different. The peak heights were different. The spin rates in my test were similar. I don't think they would be similar for everybody. I think the Blueprint would spin more. But could I summarize what you just said, Eric, by saying the reduction in loft is in response to the technology?
Yeah, that's a fair statement.
Okay. It is not simply to make the ball go further. It's to get the trajectory to work and look the way it should.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things going on when you compare those two irons. Obviously, there's the construction and the way that they bend during impact, but there's also the mass properties, right? Where's the CG at? You know, obviously the I-500 is a much you know, not much, but it's longer from heel to toe. It's a more forgiving iron. You know, the CG's in a little bit of a different spot, so that influences, you know, also the response and the delivery. And so, you know, there's a lot of components here that kind of go into the performance that our designers use to really tune that performance for that particular player. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the technology, the construction, and the way that iron responds during impact is a big piece of that.
Okay, and I think it's quite interesting to note, because Ping offers a power spec which is stronger lofts and a retro spec, more loft. But on the I-500, correct me if I'm wrong, actually the G410, they do not offer, which has the same face flexing technology. The G410, I believe you don't offer retro spec.
Well, I mean, with all of our irons, they're all custom built, right? So you can you can always order and dial in the loft and get them weaker or stronger. But I believe you're right on the kind of stock you know, stock offerings. Yeah. So
correct. Which I think is a little bit of a telltale sign that you guys are not simply just de-lofting it to make it go far. You're de-lofting it to get it to fly the right way. You're getting it for most people, you're de-lofting it to get it to fly the right way. Okay, I think that's a biggie. That's really a message I wanted to get across to people. Erik, another thing that was interesting that came out of this test that I did, I used the I-210s, but one thing that was interesting was the two irons that I tested, they were not exactly the same, obviously different heads. But the Blueprint was a red dot and the I-500 was a black dot. Essentially, the I-500 was 1 degree more upright than the Blueprint.
Yeah.
Yet, my dynamic lie with the I-500 at impact, and I hit 6 shots with each club, not back to back, I mixed it up. My dynamic lie was flatter with the I-500 than it was with the shorter faced Blueprint iron. Can you explain why that is the case?
Yeah, so and we do a lot of research using our motion capture system and trying to understand how club designs influence delivery. And a piece of that is just, you know, the CG location relative to the shaft axis. So the I-500 being a little bit of a longer iron, the CG is located a little bit further from that shaft axis. And as a result, as you deliver that iron, it may toe down a little bit more. Because you saw that I-500 be delivered with a little bit of
definitely. Whilst the Blueprint was a 1 degree flatter iron, I tended to hit it more left, which is a product of an iron being too upright. Okay, for me. Yeah. And the I-500 I hit more online as a more upright club, but it was head design, the shape, essentially the length of the blade, like you said, that was causing that toe to flex down and changing the face angle coming into impact. And I think that's something that I'm going to tuck away in my head. I saw that many, many years ago, and it was beyond my comprehension at the time. But now, thanks to my relationship with Ping and talking to you guys and you guys teaching me, I can look at that and go, that makes sense. I understand that better now.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, so when we're doing an iron fitting, we talk a lot about ball flight is king. And so, you know, we have kind of this progression during our fitting as we're trying to dial in a lie angle for a player. You know, and you're really looking at the model, and then we use kind of a static color code, you know, Karsten, you know, the iconic color code chart, right? You find that color code, you find that model, but once you kind of dialed in the model and the shaft, we then kind of fine tune that lie angle to make sure that that combination is delivering it the way we want to. So through a dynamic swing test and looking at ball flight, getting on a launch monitor, that helps us really dial in that lie angle for a player. That is a function of kind of the combination of model and shaft and all that you're putting in somebody's hands.
I think that's important because I'm always, with my students, I'm always saying, listen, there's two numbers you've got to know. You've got to know the length of your iron, and don't give me standard because every company's standard is different. Know the length of your 6 or a 7 iron. Everything else is going to be based off of that. And know the lie angle of your 6 or your 7 iron. Okay? There's a problem now because if you're changing the design or the shape of the head, if you're going from one genre of golf club to the next, that lie angle may no longer be feasible for you. And so that's why, you know, like you said, ball flight is king in a fitting. We got to look at that. Okay.
Yeah.
Erik, very cool. Thank you. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about, I would love to hit on water on the face, friction, spin rates. The first question I've got for you is as follows. And guys, please, as you're watching, feel free to type in some questions. I've seen a few go by. Keep them coming. I'll throw a few of those at Dr. Henrikson here whenever I can. So here's something to keep in mind. I often see on TrackMan in the morning when I've got someone hitting shots out on the range, the grass is a little wet, they're hitting a 7 iron, and all of a sudden they hit one and the spin rate goes way down, the launch goes up a little bit, and the ball carries an extra 15 yards. Flyer.
Yeah.
Okay, flyer. Most golfers are not even aware that it could possibly happen off the fairway. It can happen off the fairway, off a good lie if you got some moisture involved. So a lot of people see that and they go, oh man, I think I'm just going to wet my driver face, or I'm going to wet my golf ball when I tee off. Can you give us some insight as to what might actually happen there when we switch it from irons and wedges to driver?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Andrew. So I think just kind of a story of my background, friction's been something that I've had the opportunity to look into quite a bit during my 10 years at Ping. And I remember this was like first couple weeks at Ping, and I was sitting, we had this, it's like a golf science meeting. Every 2 weeks, get together with our engineers and kind of, you know, look at tough questions that we're trying to answer and recognize where we have knowledge gaps. And John Kay, our president, you know, was like, man, you know, 4 irons on a dewy morning, I see these things just balloon up and always land short. And everybody's kind of like going, shouldn't they be a flyer, right? Like, it's wet, it's, you know, shouldn't you actually like lower the spin rate, and shouldn't it actually carry farther rather than balloon up on you? And some ballooning up kind of indicates that there's actually a little more spin. And he kind of turns to like, or I still remember, she's like, you got a PhD. What? You tell me why. I don't know. Paul was in the room too, you know, we're probably sitting in the corner. But, you know, as we started to then study that a little bit more, we realized that you know, water's influence on spin rate and performance is a function of loft or the spin loft. And so what you might see on something like a 9-iron is not necessarily what you would see on a 3-iron. It has a different effect. So starting with kind of high levels of spin lofts, you know, 9-iron, pitching wedge, as you introduce moisture, what the ball does is it just slides right up the face, right? So even with the 7-iron example that you shared, it slides right up the face and never quite grabs. Okay, so it never engages and gets to a point where the surface of the ball is not sliding on the contact point with the club. And so it comes off with very little spin. But then when you get to the stronger lofts, driver, 3-wood, you know, 4-iron, 3-iron, what ends up happening when you introduce a little bit of moisture is the ball slides and then grabs. Whereas if it was dry with those stronger lofts, it would just grab almost immediately, right? So it's a much less oblique impact. So the ball engages and it sticks when it's dry, but when it's wet, it slides and then grabs. And so when you get that sliding and grabbing is actually where you get the most spin. You actually get more spin that way than you do if it just grabs like right away. And so that's what the
just sorry to interrupt, just for everybody watching, okay, that may sound weird, just go with it, trust it, okay? If you want to learn more, look up Dr. Rod Cross. He's done a lot of testing, a lot of research. It's true. Thanks, Erik. Carry on.
Yeah, so Rod Cross, you brought him up. He's got some really accessible, the slip and grip of bouncing balls. So Google that, Rod Cross. He's got basketballs bouncing against things and showing how the friction, you know, does this during like contact of a basketball with the skate. He does super balls, super interesting stuff if you really want to kind of geek out on that. But, you know, Paul Wood, my colleague, you're talking to him later this week. He always talked about some of his worst injuries on turf where it was a little bit wet, right? And so you plant and you slide and then it grabs on you. And so you've kind of created this tangential speed and then your cleat grabs and your ankle rolls versus like, you know, somebody sliding on clay in tennis, it just kind of, you never quite grab. It's where you slide and grab where you get this huge amount of impulse that can hurt you. Same thing with the ball on the club face. As it's sliding up the club and it grabs, that's where you get more spin. And so, you know, on a driver, we're actually, you know, you lower your friction, you potentially could be increasing your spin rate on a driver, which is kind of counterintuitive because, you know, on a wedge, if you lower your friction, you're decreasing your spin rate. And so there's this kind of weird transition as you go from like lower loft to higher loft where friction has kind of an opposite effect on your spin rate.
So moral of the story is do not wet your golf balls before you tee off with them.
I would not recommend.
It won't work out. It won't work out. Okay, Erik, I wanted to talk, and I love spin and friction and all that. This is a test that I would not have believed had I not seen it. The Ping Glide 3.0. Okay, and this is not about the plug-in Ping, although it is going to plug Ping because I believe in Ping and what you guys are doing. And if you haven't seen the latest My Golf Spy Driver 2020 report, go and check that out. You'll learn some cool stuff too. But the Ping Glide 3.0 water test.
Yeah.
Okay. Versus another prominent wedge maker. Okay. Yeah. What did you see? And honestly, you've seen the test happen, I'm sure, a lot more than me. I've seen it happen 5 times, and every time it's been the same result. Yeah. And so it's legit and it's a real thing. Can you tell us what you found, what you saw?
Yeah. So, you know, there's a number of design elements as a result of research that we've done that are incorporated into our glide wedges. You know, we do a lot of testing both outdoors on the range and with our swing robot Pingman Andrew, you've seen our interns taping up grass.
Blades of grass. Yeah.
You know, it's a rite of passage. It's in Ping A&T is taping up, you know, blades of grass to kind of hit through on our swing robot, you know, and get out there with scissors and cut those off the range. And, you know, groove research is a big piece of that. And then looking at how well the surface sheds water. So people have probably heard us talk about hydrophobicity or hydrophobic, you know, hydropearl which is kind of a play off of the hydrophobic behavior. But basically that's talking about how well the surface sheds water. And, you know, something hydrophilic, the friend of water, is something that kind of, you know, water will stay on that surface. It won't beat up, whereas something like Gore-Tex or something like that is going to beat up and shed that water easily. And so
I'm gonna go to sleep tonight thinking about hydrophobicity. That's a cool word right there. Sorry to interrupt there.
You'll wake up with a phobia. You know, we have grooves that were specifically designed for those glide wedges, as well as this chrome that we had done a lot of research with. This hydropearl chrome, it looks great, but the huge benefit is it provides this performance enhancement of being able to shed the water. And so the combination of those grooves and that coating really allow us to maintain spin rates in conditions that are not ideal. So if you get into, you know, indoor environment off of a mat, you know, you're gonna, you know, there's nothing between the club and the ball, which is super ideal. And more times than not, the highest lofted wedge you can hit indoors is going to be the one that spins the most. Now you get into the real world where you have a little bit of grass, moisture, even if the grass looks dry, and we've shown you some fan and video of this, you know, people hitting chips, and you can see the moisture just be squeezed out of the grass as it comes into impact with the ball. In those, you know, non-ideal conditions, it's really important to ensure that you have quality contact and you can maintain your spin rate to get predictable performance. And so, you know, one of the ways we tried this out was just say, okay, not everybody can, a lot of fittings happen indoors. So we just started spraying, you know, water on the ball to kind of introduce a bit of that real world condition. And, you know, and compare that to some of our competitors. And indeed, like you saw us maintain, you know, you're talking, you know, in general, you might see a spin rate go from on a partial wedge shot, maybe 8,000 to 4,000. You know, with our glide wedges, you're only going 8,000 to like 7,000 when you're going from dry to wet conditions. And so that's speaking to maintaining that spin rate, maintaining that trajectory, and using our grooves and that hydropearl chrome finish, the hydrophobicity of that, to help shed water and get better friction between the club and the ball. And that's super important. You're talking to Sal, I think, later today or tomorrow from Arcos, right?
Yeah.
And we partner with him, and we got a lot of data now coming in on where are people using wedges. You know, if you kind of break down rough, fairway, sand, you know, full swings, and you kind of say, okay, where are they using it? You know, 60 to 70% of the time, people are using their highest lofted wedge out of the rough. You know, it's not out of the fairway. It's out of these, you know, conditions that are not ideal. And so it's super important to be able to, you know, not just get performance off a dry mat, but I'd argue it's of supreme importance to get that, you know, that behavior, that predictable spin rate and trajectory out of non-ideal conditions, because that's where you're using it the most.
Totally. And Erik, I've seen a few questions come by. The durability of this hydrophobic finish obviously depends on how many golf balls you're hitting on the same spot on the club face.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we do a lot of durability testing at Ping, combination of, you know, kind of lab tests where you're dropping little bits of media at high speeds onto the surface to make sure that it maintains, and then lot of wear testing, where we literally have people come in and put so many shots, thousands of shots
Yeah.
on our clubs, wedges included. And we did some testing where we, had a bunch of those shots hit and then brought it in and did it's called a water droplet test, where you put a water droplet in there and kind of measure the contact angle of that water droplet. And so, through, the lifetime of a wedge, things degrade over a long period of time, but we work really hard and pride ourselves on having equipment that lasts a long time that you can hand down to, your kids or whatever, and still perform at a high level. So something we test quite a bit is the durability of our finishes and our clubs.
Cool, Eric. Thank you. I see a question, and I know I had a student the other day asking about, I know the G710 irons, the rocket ship G710s, black.
Yeah.
Is there a plan for 3.0 glides black? Or am I jumping ahead here?
Well, we're always working on something. I think, we get wedges in, of all sorts of different finishes. So from an engineering standpoint, like, it's doable. It's a good question for
if it's
a non-engineer.
Doable, I'll look for it. If it's doable, I'll look for it. I'll be waiting. One of the questions, Eric, is what is the next frontier for engineering to help golfers play better? Man, I got to tell you, with you're only allowed to go 460. You're only allowed to go I think it's 0.83 COR. A driver head is pretty much can only be optimally around 205 grams weight wise. You guys have your work cut out for you to make things better and better and better. I know you've got some ideas. What do you see in the future?
Oh man, it's got a lot of answers to it.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away as well. I mean, I think so in innovation, we talk a lot about breaking trade-offs. Like that's a huge, a huge piece of what we do. And so, a lot of times you can improve one area, but then you end up taking a hit in another area. So, for something like the Blueprint iron, right? We saw that level of player. If you put something smaller, more compact in their hands, you can actually see their stat area, kind of their impact dispersion on the face reduce. It was almost this kind of aim small, miss small kind of phenomena where you put something smaller in a good player's hands and they have a tighter impact area. But then, with that, you're now lowering the MOI of the club. And so, how can we leverage that knowledge, that insight, maybe making something a little more compact, but as forgiving as something that would be larger, right? So, our G400 driver was a little bit smaller footprint, but as forgiving as its predecessor that was a little bit bigger. And so, we're able to deliver something that had that, appealing look to it, but was as forgiving as something that was a little bit bigger. And so, trade-offs like that are big and can deliver performance to, the everyday golfer. Talk about I-500 iron, how can we, improve ball speed, get, more normalized ball speed across the face. So maintaining, how do you get something to flex, but flex in such a way that you get ball speeds that are consistent across the face, and it sounds good. These are trade-offs that we're continuing to grapple with, both to help people perform better and enjoy the game more. I think lastly,
go ahead.
Oh, just another area that I think is really emerging and important in terms of helping people play better is the ability to actually give you real stats. And it may sound like I'm plugging Arcos, but the reality is being able to have, and you've experienced this, data like that to look at how far you're actually hitting your clubs, where do you have gaps. Us as a club manufacturer gives us understanding as how to better design equipment to help people, play better and target certain areas of people's games and clubs for certain areas of people's games that, kind of reveal that opportunity, not only to us as a manufacturer, but you as a player. Now you have all this data in front of you, and they do Arcos, for example. There's a number of them out there. You can now look at this, and they present the data really well to really highlight, oh, wow, this is an area where for the everyday golfer, they can see that and now start to practice, start to implement, and you do a great job introducing drills for people to kind of target certain areas of their game and improve that area of the game. So I think that's another frontier that's just kind of kicking off, but is really going to help people play better and enjoy the game more.
And Erik, I do, I'm certainly on the inside, and but just, you guys are looking, and the question was really, what's the new frontier in engineering? I think you guys are going beyond that, as illustrated with your relationship with Arcos. You're looking at what do human beings do? How do they play golf? Where do they hit most of their wedge shots from? And you guys convinced me to align with Arcos, and it's been just absolutely brilliant. And that's why I've got Sal on tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to learning from him. I think Arcos is a sleeping giant. Coaches, engineers, golfers can learn a tremendous amount from their data. You guys are aligning with ambassadors, Sasha McKenzie, Chris Como, Chuck Cook, people like that. I think that's super cool, because you want to go beyond just how can we make this golf club look better. You want to understand how it's being used and what's really happening out there in the real world. And your affiliation with Game Life Training, I think Ian and Matt, is so cool, because you're working on how can we make a fitting environment more real? How can we make it more like the actual arena within which you actually play golf? And all of that goes into play your best, I think. It really is cool, because I'm not looking that hard, but I really don't see that many other manufacturers kind of looking down those avenues and trying to figure out how that can happen. How can we really help players play their best? It's how can we sell some more clubs? You guys are certainly in the business of selling clubs, but I do love that overarching theme of we're going to do all we can to figure out how to play your best.
Yeah, you said it very well, Andrew. I think, we got a lot of passionate, curious players that are designing our clubs, that are researching, and I think that drives a lot of that. All of us are kind of experiencing a wide range of levels, and we experience that pain, and we're curious, and by interacting with guys like you and Chuck and Chris, and we get these questions that it's kind of like, man, that's a great question, we don't have the answer to it, but we have the ability to go in and find that answer. And ultimately the insights we get out of that turn into knowledge and ultimately wisdom that we can plug into clubs and deliver to, deliver to our customers. So.
And you guys have some players, you got Marty Jodson, who made the cut in a major. We've got Corey Bacon, Shane Bacon's brother.
The lesser known Bacon. He'll be the more well-known Bacon.
Shane Bacon's brother. And then we've got Matt Simone, good player. We've got Erik Henrikson. Erik, you were recently involved in a match play battle for your club championship. Can you tell us what happened? Come on, give us the scoop there. Really good playing.
Yeah, I don't know if I shot you a text. For those of you, Andrew's been
it was awesome.
Gracious enough to help me with my swing. So, I was hitting the ball great. Made it to the finals of the club championship. My first time playing in a match play tournament. Had a great second round. I won the match in 22 holes after being down 2 on 16. So I was down 2 on 16, and I had this mindset of like, I cannot lose to this guy. And there's this level of adrenaline and intensity and just like, and it was a great kind of nugget there winning that
Yeah.
match to kind of build on. But then I got to the final, playing a really good player. I don't even know if on my best day I'd be able to beat him. But I won the first hole. We pushed the second hole. We're on the third hole. And Andrew, I don't know if you remember, you've played it. Third hole at Moon Valley. It's kind of a short par four. I hit a nice drive. I'm like 50 yards from the green, kind of light rough. And he hits his drive OB. I'm like, all right. And he ends up getting up and down for bogey. And I end up I can feel the adrenaline going, kind of just baby this chip up there, and I end up, basically bogeying the hole. So I go on to 4, par 5. I'm up 1, but now I got thoughts in my head going like, I feel the adrenaline, like PN Lynn. I might butcher this, but PN Lynn, Vision 54. They talk about kind of where do players operate well in terms of like kind of an adrenaline spectrum.
Yes.
You got like Tiger, who's like hyper focused, and then you got DJ, who's more laid back. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I got the adrenaline going. I need to calm myself down. So I calm myself down by going, runner-up's not bad. I made it to the final. It's pretty good. I got these thoughts like that. Before I know it, he birdies the next 3 holes and I'm down, and I end up losing 6 and 5. But it was
experience, man.
Learning experience. So I kind of know. No, I probably need to be more on that. Kind of like the second round match rather than trying to take the pressure off myself.
I will not. Yeah. It's it's cool though, because I know in the golf coaching world, everybody in the golf coaching world ended up in the golf coaching world because they loved golf and they wanted to play. They really wanted to play. I can't think of anyone that is currently a golf coach who at some point didn't want to chase the dream of playing. And it's the same for what you guys do. You guys have so many good players there. Erik, I wanted to get us back on track. I've got a question for you, and I think I know the answer, but I've got a question for you pertaining to shaft length with driver. Okay?
Yep.
Let's say someone's coming in for a fitting and they really like this G410 head, but they're not sure on shaft length. And so they're going to test a 44, a 45, and a 46. And I understand everybody's going to be different, but just give us some insights as to what we might see.
Yeah, so, we have a lot of what we call limit curves at Ping. So we take a certain variable and we look at how that variable influences performance. Shaft length being one of them. And so we've done a number of tests where we varied shaft length, but then, kept the swing weight the same. So try and keep the overall, swing weight's not a perfect proxy for moment of inertia of the club. But as you make something longer or shorter, it may or may not become harder to swing. And so you got to adjust the weight to make sure that you're only really influencing the length, the effect of the length. And so we've done that. And basically for every inch that you add to the length of a driver, on average, we saw an increase of about 1 mile an hour of ball speed.
And that,
half a degree.
I love that. Sorry to interrupt. I love that because that is significantly less than I would anticipate. So if you take this away, if you add 1 inch of length to your driver, or you lengthen the shaft by 1 inch, you stand to gain 1 mile per hour, which at the very top end of the spectrum is like 2.5 yards, 2.75 yards is what you're going to gain. Okay, cool. Thank you. Carry on.
And so, some of that's so a little bit higher launch, a little bit more spin with that. And, potentially like a 10% like increase in stat area. And that's just a broad survey over a large population. And you're going to have people who gain more ball speed out of that and don't, like increase their stat area. And you're going to have people who, if you go longer, they lose ball speed because they just can't find the center of the face, and their dispersion increases. And so there's this bit of trade-off that you have to evaluate as a fitter, as to, okay, let's try a couple different things here, see where you fit on kind of that spectrum. We kind of know on average we would expect your ball speed to go up a little bit, your launch angle to go up a little bit, as with your spin rate, and then we'll see what happens to kind of your offline. But it's important, and this is a really good, like, just a nugget. Chris Brody, he's Brody the younger, Brody the elder being Mark Brody, went in and did a big analysis on all of our player test data and performance data, used some strokes gained analysis to kind of say, okay, what is the trade-off between distance and offline in a fitting, right? That's a huge question. If I'm fitting somebody for a driver and I can get them a couple extra yards, but then maybe their offline increases a little bit, which one wins, right? Is it better to have the extra distance, or is it better to have a tighter dispersion? And so what he did is he looked at, like, your elite golfers, your aspiring tour players and things like that, and he looked at kind of your average golfer. And the kind of metric that he found was, the break-even point for, like, your better player is 3 to 1. So if you gain 3 yards, but that comes at, like, an increase of offline variance of a yard, that's kind of breaking even in performance. Okay. So if you gain 3 yards, or if you gain, 5 yards and only 1 yard offline deviation, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
For the average golfer, it's more 2 to 1. So for every 2 yards that you gain in distance, a 1 yard increase in offline is kind of break even, right? And so it's a good, as a fitter, if you're watching and you're a fitter, it's a really good nugget to kind of go that quick. Okay, he just hit it 4 more yards, but his offline went an extra yard. Which one wins? It's definitely the extra distance.
Yeah.
But now if it's like, well, you got 4 more yards, but 4 yards extra deviation, you might be going, maybe we need to, try and tighten this up a little bit. But, and you got, we focus, our bread and butter has been forgiveness, right? And MOI. Sure. And our driver heads are super stable. Yeah. And so when you increase length, you got a really stable head on there that preserves ball speed. And so, you can increase that length and get that extra club head speed, and that forgiving head's really going to help you kind of maintain that ball speed. But again, you really got to look at the numbers. Most people now have access to some level of launch monitor that you can then pull up and kind of use that metric of, like, okay, how much did I gain and how much am I sacrificing, and which one wins here? I think that's a really important thing that, and again, credit to Chris Brody and Marty Jertson for kind of diving into that and getting that insight. I think it's an important
That's so cool for you guys to share that. Cool that you guys know that. Erik, I really do appreciate the time, the sharing of information. I know you guys have over at Ping HQ there a treasure trove of information, and I'm always so excited to get out there and just talk about, whatever questions I have in my head. So hopefully you've answered a bunch of questions for some people watching in today. Really, really do appreciate your time. Erik Henrikson, Director of Innovation. I love that title. I wish I was like the king of innovation of something.
Well, thanks for having me on, Andrew. I think you got a great lineup this week. I was looking at that, and I'll be tuning in myself to check out some of your other conversations. So awesome. Anytime.
Please do. Thank you. And thank you for that little plug for the rest of the week, everybody. I appreciate you all watching in. Tune in. I'll post up a couple of times on my Instagram what's coming up later in the week. If you've got questions, have them planned. I'm looking forward. I've spoken to Sasho a bunch, and we've got some kind of people that I've heard from quite a bit. But I'm really looking forward to talking to Sal from Arcos. I'm looking forward to talking with Larry Ward Great junior golf coach, not only junior golf coach, but golf coach out of Kentucky. And my good buddy, Ian Fraser from TXG. I'm sure many of you know him. So it's going to be a cool week. Thanks so much for tuning in, Erik. Appreciate it. Stay safe and be kind to your wife.
Oh, I will. Is Carrie back there? Is she shooting this right now?
She's back there. She's back there. You know, we're conserving as much Wi-Fi as possible. But as my cousin says, he says, my Wi-Fi at my house is more Wi than Fi. And we're experiencing a bit of that. So thanks for joining in, Erik. Have a great week.
Take care. See ya.
Tuesday. There she is. There she is. Maniac. See you, bud.
See ya.